Hello, welcome, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. We're obviously aware that this is a difficult time for all of us, particularly those in Ukraine. So before starting, I just wanted to say, of course, that my thoughts, that those of the Fondation Tali and those of our guests tonight go out to those in Ukraine and of course their families abroad. So yes, I just wanted to say that. And of course, well, thank you very much for joining us today for Creators Facing Climate Emergency. So a series of conversations in both French and English that brings together each time an artist and a scientist or thinker to discuss their work as well as their ideas, thoughts and solutions regarding today's environmental issues. So I would like to express my sincere thanks to Thijs Biersteker and Meriem Bouamrane for joining us today and participating in this. For those who are new to the program or to the Fondation Tali, we are a multidisciplinary art foundation and artist residency based in Brussels, founded by the curator, collector and writer Nathalie Bouillot. And at the moment at the foundation in Brussels is a beautiful exhibition by the artist Kiki Smith, as you can see behind me. So I highly recommend seeing that if you're in Brussels or passing by soon. My name is Stefano Vendramin. I'm a curator specialized in art relating to the environment.
And I guess this is the part where the host drops out. Right? Am I the only one?
No, we are here. Yeah.
Okay.
We are with you, Thijs.
In that case, so this is normally a podcast, right? So we can do our own introduction, or we wait till he's back.
Oh. Yes, I'm sure he will be back.
I just said he will be back quickly. So, how are you?
I'm good, and you in this context?
Yeah.
Grateful that, yeah.
That it's not here yet, and it's an interesting time to be in, especially this week. It's how do you say that? It's almost I don't know how to give it a place yet because it's happening so quickly. Every escalation from the IPCC report to Ukraine, it's a interesting week that came to us. So I still have to read the whole IPCC report, which I'll probably never do, but the 40-page summary, that's something I'm gonna do this weekend. So I'm excited to that. Yeah, we already started.
Okay. I really apologize for that. Thank you for your patience. Did you actually continue without me or?
No, we were waiting for you to introduce ourselves. We were just chatting with Thijs and waiting for you. Go on.
Okay. So apologies for that. I have an internet problem. So today we want to talk about what is the role and responsibility of the artists, thinkers, and scientists with regard to the environmental issues that we are all facing. How are artistic practices being impacted, and how can artists collaborate with other disciplines to create a better future? And how can we imagine new ways of creating given our limited existing resources? So we believe strongly that we need more than ever in this time of environmental crisis to hear the words of the creators as well around us, those that can help us conceive and construct new ways of being in the world. So this conversation will last for about an hour, and there'll be time for questions at the end. So please feel free to think of your questions as you're watching and listening. There'll be time for the end for you to ask. And so to introduce the conversation, so I'd like first of all to introduce Thijs Biersteker. Thank you very much again for being here today. So you're an artist based near Amsterdam, a former tutor at the Delft University of Technology, and also a fellow at the VU University in Amsterdam. And your immersive interactive art installations integrate scientific research and new technologies to illustrate the impact of topics such as climate change, air pollution, ocean plastic, and the Anthropocene through tangible experiences that create awareness around these topics, or in your own words, that make people feel the facts. In order to do so, you collaborate with some of the top scientists in universities around the world, combining in your work various elements such as sensors, living trees, kinetic motion recognition, big data visualizations, and recycled plastics. As we see, here's an example of one of the works, Wither, that we will be discussing today. So this work was about deforestation, made in collaboration with UNESCO, of whom we have, of course, Meriem Bouamrane today, with LVMH and with Art of Change 21, and was displayed at the IUCN World Conservation Congress around biodiversity at Marseille last year. Also, other work that you've created recently include Symbiosa, which you created in collaboration with botanist and author of Plant Intelligence, Stefano Mancuso, which was shown at the exhibition Trees at the Fondation Cartier in Paris. And you're also founder of a studio, Woven Studio, which works together with universities, scientists, research groups, museums, and architects, creating collaborative work in an ethical and sustainable manner. And a recent project, for instance, included a collaboration with the European Space Agency and Leiden University to reveal the mysterious nature of dark matter. And perhaps you'd like to also share, I know you're doing many exhibitions and talks around the world. Maybe you would like to share some of your current news with our audience.
Yeah, so thank you for this long introduction, and it's always humbling to hear everything that's coming at you. So this is going to be an interesting year. So last year we had a year of basically creating a lot of work, and this year it's slowly coming out. So I think one of the big highlights is being one of the centerpieces of the Barbican show, Our Time on Earth, that's coming this May. We're going to do a great project in Arnhem, which is a museum in the Netherlands, which is opening after 4 years. We're making a centerpiece in the garden where we're connecting the trees. And we're also, and we just came from that, installing that today, is making another work in the Groot Museum, another new museum in Amsterdam, where we have roots growing from a 300-year-old tree inside of the building, data roots. So, and there's many more to come. And I think in a few weeks, we'll launch our own work, Lose Out of Everything, where we talk about sustainability of the internet and of Zoom conversations like this.
Okay, fantastic. Well,
a lot of it's going on. Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing all of those work in physical now that we're allowed to go out of our houses.
Yes.
And Meriem Bouamrane, Meriem, thank you very much for joining us today. So you are an environmental economist and chief of section on research and policy on biodiversity and ecology in the division of ecological and earth sciences, and in particular the Man and the Biosphere program, for which you have been working since 2001, so for over 20 years. And in 2019, notably, you were part of the organization of the landmark first report on global biodiversity, published by the IPBES, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And it found that due to human impact on the environment in the past 30 to 50 years, the Earth's biodiversity has suffered a catastrophic decline, which was unprecedented in human history. So to give some conclusions, between 500,000 and 1 million species are projected to become extinct in the next decade, or in the next few decades. And an estimated 82% of wild mammal biomass has already been lost, 40% of amphibians, and almost a third of reef-building corals, more than a third of marine mammals, and 10% of all insects are threatened with extinction. So it's a really, really, really important matter. It's really important work that you're doing, and we're really interested to hear more about that work. And so at UNESCO in particular, more generally, you're responsible for the research and training programs on biodiversity that incorporate many different participatory approaches in particular, and incorporates so-called biosphere reserves, which are designated learning places for sustainable development, which are research and pilot sites for learning more widely how humans and the rest of the living world can live together in harmony. and you are also the coordinator of the Euromap network, the oldest and largest network of the world network of biosphere reserves, comprising 727 sites in 131 countries. Do you have would you like to add anything else about that, or your current projects that you're working on in particular, current sites?
We just finished today the meeting of the advisory committee that is helping us to designate new sites. So I think that the number you have just shared is probably going to increase this year, and we much look forward to have more countries and more citizens and private sector engaged into sustainable development. This is what we do. And I'll make sure that I don't use too many acronyms, because that was a long list of acronyms that you've shared with us, including IBES, etc. I'll try to be understandable.
It certainly comes with the territory. And so perhaps you can tell us a little bit more then, about biosphere reserves, for those that don't know exactly what that is. You have I listened to one of your podcasts in which you participated recently, and you said, without biodiversity, there is no society, no culture, no economy. So really, really powerful statement. Could you tell us a little bit more about these biosphere reserves, and what is this main issue regarding biodiversity? Now I feel like it's something that we're increasingly talking about, but I feel like it's a relatively recent phenomenon. I feel like before we were very much, we just need to, for instance, with trees, we just need to plant as many trees as possible. Or even with bees, I know it's a big situation in Brussels where there's a lot of people supporting bees, which is fantastic. But at the same time, now we realize that, there's hundreds of species of bees and, even more species of trees. And actually, it's not so straightforward as just to plant trees and help bees because of the biodiversity being such an important factor. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about this issue.
Yeah, so it's a concept, it's a complex concept, biodiversity. It's a scientific word. If I would like to summarize, I would say it's about life, like you can see in my background, which is the motto of our program that celebrated 50 years last year. Biodiversity is in fact the living fabric of Earth, of our planet, or of our home. This is what is making us alive, nourishing us. It's based on interactions. This is what is complex to understand. It's not only about species. People, as you have just done, speak about species. It's invisible diversity, like genetic diversity or genes, what also make us digest in our stomach, which is absolutely necessary when we eat something. It's about species and the diversity of species that are going to interact with a diversity of ecosystems, such as coastal zones, tropical forest, desert, arid lands, and us, humans, that are part of this diversity of life, and that we have a specific role because we are the only species, unfortunately, which is able to destroy at such a large scale all the other living species. So what is important to understand is that it's the life-bearing system of Earth. This is what is providing us with water, and we die without drinking water for 3 days, with food, with the air, but it's everything about interactions. And what is important is that our lives as humans is completely interwoven in the life of the other species. And the scientists are really demonstrating through the different scientific reports, like the IBES one that you have referred to in 2019 when it was out at UNESCO, and the recently IPCC report that with Thijs we were talking just before together. It's really demonstrating that for the first time in the human life on Earth, humans are completely responsible for both the loss of biodiversity and also for the increase of climate change. And this is having a direct impact on us as humans, on our lives and our future, and our present and our future on Earth. So this is vital to really fight against the loss of biodiversity, to really address these challenges is crucial. And for UNESCO, you have to address both issues at the same time. Biodiversity was not high on the agenda as much as climate change for different reasons, because the loss of biodiversity is not that visible. It's not as spectacular as climate change, where you see the glacier melting or the fire, the heat, causing fires and destruction, like recently in Europe. And so it's like silent disappearance and not visible, and people are focusing on maybe one aspect of it, but it's just a life web that is connecting us with the rest of the species. So that's why it's very important that everybody is feeling engaged into that solution, and that we go beyond the complexity of scientific words and figures that are stressful, that are real, but that also people know that the scientists, what they are sharing with us in their scientific reports, they are also saying that it's possible to act, that it's not too late, and that there are already actions that us as human, we can implement that can stop and possibly reverse the trends. So this is also one message I think that we want to share with Thijs today. It's bad. We cannot continue the way we continue to live and inhabit Earth, but there are solutions. And that's what we do in my program, in the Man and the Biosphere program since 50 years, where you have in every country, in every ecosystems, the proof, the evidence that humans are able to live in harmony with nature, to thrive, to consume, to produce, without destroying the ecosystems. And this is also something that is very important to share today. It is possible. It's not something that we have to start from scratch. It's happening already everywhere on the planet, on every ecosystems. And this is what we do in the biosphere reserves and in other programs of UNESCO. But this is the minority that should become like the leaders. And this is a bit what we're trying to do, open access of this science and open access of these solutions that we have in this biosphere reserve, for example.
And so you make a really good point, which is that, it's a very, very significant issue that really affects everything, but it's something that we see much less than other parts of climate change. And I guess that brings us nicely onto your work, Thijs, which is very much about creating visibility for scientific facts, for scientific issues that we don't hear or see as much as we should. And notably, of course, you worked with Meriem on a work called Wither. You worked with UNESCO on this work, and perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about this this artistic interest. How did this come about?
Well, I think in general, I agree with Meriem that a lot of the scientific facts and the complexity is often lost in the headlines that is reaching us. So sometimes the complexity in these headlines is just not there. And what I'm trying to do always when I work with scientists is search for one of these facts that we can relate to, but that we can understand to, and that builds that bridge towards a broader idea. And in this case with Wither, this was in the beginning of the pandemic when the idea started, and that's where the first data came in. So here you can see where it's good to give a bit of context. So it's a slice of rainforest that uses the real-time data coming from UNESCO, and it translates the deforestation data into a slice of rainforest that's disappearing as fast as the rainforest is disappearing somewhere hidden in the Amazon basin. And we use that data for a really good reason, because I've been reading about this since I was a teenager, how much rainforest is disappearing, but I have no idea about the scale and the size of that impact it has on a daily level. So when the data came in, when we started working together, we were shocked. And when we heard that there was a 71% increase during COVID of the deforestation in the Amazon, it was even more shocking, because it's basically the moment that nobody's watching is when, and nobody's able to watch, is when the most horrible thing to our climate is happening, and to our biodiversity issue at the same time. So we used the data, we brought it alive, and we gave it a place in front of you. So the slice of rainforest disappearing right in front of you, not somewhere hidden in the jungle.
Yeah, I read, the fact that we are losing 641 meters squared of rainforest every second. And so each flickering of the leaf in the work wither is marking the loss of 250 meters squared of rainforest.
Yeah, so, exactly. So it was if I can describe it, it's a sculpture of a tree that's grown with the most endangered plants in the Amazon at this moment. And every time you can see one of the leaves becoming transparent. So normally it's translucent and it's just white, and it can be completely transparent. And in this way, you can actually see the different leaves fading away, just like the rainforest is. And we used every leaf, so we broke up the 300, almost 4,000 square meters of rainforest disappearing into all those leaves, and that made it actually 128 square meters per leaf that's disappearing. And I guess what you always see is people come to the work, they are enticed by it, they walk towards it, they emphasize with it and with the aesthetics, and then they start having the message sink in when they read the data that we're using, and then it places the whole sculpture in a different context. And I think that's the power of art and science combined, because at that moment you can see what the data is actually telling us. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have today, because, well, facts, they're becoming a fluidity, while there should be cement. And well, cement is a really bad example because it's actually causing 9% of all the emissions worldwide. But cement is something we can build on together. So I think we have to regain the trust in the facts that are being presented and start acting on that. And I think art has this power to help bridge that gap, and not art in particular. I think it's culture as a whole, from movies to artworks, to writings, to poems, to every form that shapes culture in any way can contribute to this bigger challenge that we're facing.
Yeah, and I think particularly now, I mean, it would be anyway the case, but particularly now when a world where we have so much information, so much data, in fact, available to us, and a lot of it now we also mistrust because of fake news. And so it feels like even more important to be able to really bring it to life in a way that is meaningful for people. So
Meriem, can I ask you, how do you choose what facts to put up front when you put out a new report? Is there?
We always try to answer a question, in fact. Yeah. The question is driving the data that we are looking for and the data that we are processing with. So, for example, in the case of the Amazon deforestation in the biosphere reserve that we are working with, we try to understand what are the direct and indirect drivers that are leading to deforestation. Why? What are the cause? And then we look at the fact that the details, we make some interview, we work with the local communities. In this program, what was very interesting is what we have done with you, Thijs, is have this, this global data coming from satellites, but then we shared those data with the authority managing the biosphere reserves and talk with them through workshops to have their view, their analysis of the situation. And it was very interesting to see, for example, with Paolo Masocco that you have met in Marseille and with the other scientists, that you can have this data that you always have to contextualize. Very important. So what is the question that we scientists want to address, and then put it in a context. And it's very interesting to have this conversation that now we are having with you today, but also from the satellites, for example, from above, with the local communities, that they can give you explanation or a point of view, or make you understand why these figures have changed, what has happened with this fire, or what was happened with this change of land use. So I think that science should also be about a conversation, not only pure data and fact, because you need to address and answer a question for us to be able to take action and to change the narrative when the narrative is not the one that we want to continue with. So this is a bit how we work. We are always combining the scientific data with what we call the local and indigenous knowledge, and their perception, their analysis of what has happened in the site, for example, in the biosphere reserves, or what was maybe for us more important, can change because of the conversation we are having with them. And this is how at the end, when we do our report, we can maybe put in highlights some data versus other data. And maybe the social or the value system, or the fact that something has happened at the level of communities was more important than the data we got from a satellite. Is it clear?
Yeah. I think basically, I mean, if the research doesn't reach us, then how can it teach us, right? So it's that whole idea of working with the communities, showing them the data, but also the satellite pictures. Because I remember when we started to work together with Paolo, where there was basically, if you can describe it, they analyzed the tree, the trees from above, the vegetation, and first day if something changed, they mark it. Second day if something changed, they put an alert flag on it. Third day if it's changed, then it gets really serious. And fourth day, I think it's counted as a loss. So it's really great that we have the satellite images to just confront us with something that's happening somewhere on a place that we have no idea of, and just connect us visually to it, because I think that's what the power of visuals can do, right?
And so, I mean, it's really enlightened, I suppose, approach by UNESCO to be doing this. I mean, it's, I guess, for the scientific field, in any case, it feels like a fairly enlightened approach that that you're taking to bring to life this data. I mean, how long have you? Is it very common that you've been working with artists, and how do those collaborations come about? How did it come about with Thijs, for instance?
Yes, I would say that it's in our DNA at UNESCO to work with artists, because we are the UN Specialized Agency for Culture, Science and Education. We have a program with Goodwill ambassadors. Many of them are artists, from very famous writers to movie stars and artists like Thijs. In the case of Thijs, it was really because of one of our partner, LVMH, that make us meet last year in the IUCN Congress. And I must say it was really, and it's still, because we are continuing to cooperate with Thijs, and I'm very happy about this. It's a very nice way to find common language from different perspectives and different vision about our world. And I think it makes completely sense to engage with artists like Thijs and others to make sure that what we're talking about is important, owned by everyone. Because what we are addressing as challenge today together, it's for everybody living on Earth. It's not only for scientists. I'm very pleased that artists like Thijs are committed, engaged, been working a long time with scientists, and is able in his own language to transmit, to translate scientific data into a different support, which is touching different layers of our humanity, like through emotions, like visuals, and as he said, able to use the fact, the evidence, very important, but touching in a different perspective, because the scientists have been saying this for years, decades, and nothing has happened. It's only recently that there is an increase of awareness, that you have seen the generation of young people demonstrating in the streets, that maybe it's taking more space in the media. But still, when you look at the gravity of the situation for both climate change, like the recent IPCC report is showing, and the IPBES report, it's just scary that we are not, focusing together to solve this issue. Because I repeat again, this is really the condition for our life on Earth. No, not less than that. So I think that one lesson is that it should not be an issue only for scientists. Again, it should be an issue that everyone, including the private sector like LVMH, including the governments, including the young people, the citizens, the association, everyone should be part of the solution. And the work of Thijs and other artists is helping to make people aware of that in a different way. One thing, and I will stop here, and Thijs, I'm sure, will have something to say on that. The sharing the fact, the data about the loss of species, about the increase of temperature, about the catastrophe, is making people feel powerless individually or collectively. This is too big, this is something I cannot address, I cannot do anything about this, and whatever I do is going to be useless. It's not true. And it's something that we really need to make sure that there is a message today that I would like to convey, is that in the media, we don't talk enough about the solution and what is possible. And again, even the scientists in the IPBES report and the IPCC are saying, because humans are responsible in a large part of what is happening, what UNESCO say is that if humans are responsible for destruction, humans can fix the problem. Humans can become guardians, custodians, protectors of biodiversity, like we witness and we see in our program, in the MAP program, in the biosphere reserves. And what the work of artists like Thijs is really showing that there is a way to act because of the emotion, and emotion, the root is moving, acting. And it's interesting to see that despite all the scientific reports, there is very few actions or engagement that is really making the train reverse. And I really hope with work like with artists and with all different kind of groups and sectors, that people can feel that they have a connection with biodiversity loss. That is, they are not separated from nature, that it's not something for the government or the scientists to fix, but it's something that in their heart, in their body, in their very daily life, they also have to tackle. And I think this was the missing thing that us scientists were lacking, is that it's not only good to talk only in the brain, you see, with fact and data and mental. It's also important for people to act and to feel, like you said, Thijs, to feel the facts. This is what also can help us to have this movement that people really think that not only they are part of the solution, that they can act, that what they do is important and can make a change, and that it's not too late.
It's a very important message. Thank you, Meriem, for sharing that. And Thijs, I'd love to know more about how do you go about creating an artwork, you know, in collaboration with scientists? Perhaps there's artists watching who would like to work more with scientists. How do we facilitate these collaborations? How do you go about collaborating?
Well, I guess it's like dealing with nature. Animals are scared for humans as humans for animals. And it's the same with these collaborations where we are intimidated by the power of the scientists and the scientists are intimidated by the power of the artists. So I think, and I don't think there's a formula. And if I had it, I would share it immediately, because this is one of my missions, is to get as much culture involved with these scientific facts. But what we do in our studio, and because we've had so much time working with different artists in different fields, we kind of try to find common ground as quick as possible. And that's partly because us and me reading into the topic as long as possible, so I actually understand it enough to start on a higher level with the conversation. And a really practical, I guess, tip for artists is know that you're talking to top scientists that are limited in their time and that are really picking their projects and where they put their energy. So what we always do is we give a complete planning in front of the collaboration, so we know how long, how much time they invest, how much we ask from them from the beginning on. And that really helps basically to comfort them, that, and with them I mean the scientists, that there is a system. And the moment we meet, and I think that's always the most interesting part, is after we found a common ground and a common language that we can talk, then it's my job as an artist to try to make a sort of fact safari through all the data, and together find that one thing that stands out, that I can relate to, that I can make other people relate to, and that can function as a sort of gateway to the deeper data and everything that's attached to it. And I guess, well, a good example for that is the work Econtinuum. Econtinuum is together with botanist Stefano Mancuso as well, where we talk about root communication and how trees are connected. Here you can see a quick movie. So for the listeners, because it's still a podcast, it's two giant root sculptures where we copied the behavior of how trees talk to each other in an algorithm. And they, based on the sensors in the room, they show how trees would communicate as if you were there under the ground. And they share nutritions, they share warning signals, but they also share this message that together we're stronger. And so what we always see is that although it's a really deep scientific work where we use data sets coming straight from the lab, the first thing that people relate to is the bigger message of how we work together and how we can collaborate as one. The second thing is they start to decipher how trees would work and how their system works and how they actually keep each other healthy no matter the competition surrounding that. And then you can see the reflection onto them as a human being a part of this ecosystem. And for me, it's really interesting to see how that happens with a lot of the work we do with scientists, where I think that's one of the power of art. It can make these big issues small again. And in doing so, it can help us imagine that bigger picture again. So that's, I guess, a part of our job is not to scare scientists or to embed them or even to be a researcher ourselves as an artist, but to use them as the foundation to build on, to build our work on. And how we most of the time work is we have our first conversations, we think we know what we're doing, we start building the work, and then involve the scientists again to fact check and to comment on it, not on an aesthetical level, because everybody has their side of the world, but purely on a scientific level. And I think with storytelling and with the fiction that we're creating with these works, don't be scared as an artist to allow yourself some artistic freedom, because some of these works, it helps to connect people. We did a work, so when you enter the room with this work, it will react on you. It will react on you as a person, involving you in the conversation. So a lot of the times we can use the tools and the sensors to make people invest into the issue that they're encountering, making them a part of them by involving them and their data streams into the data streams that are happening into the sculpture. I think that answered your question broadly, right?
Definitely. Meriem, do you have from your side, I mean, how do you think scientists can more easily collaborate with artists, like as you do at UNESCO?
Well, I think that the artwork that Thijs has just presented is amazing, because it shows two key scientific concepts very simply but very powerfully, like this interdependency that we have with each other and with the other species. I think that's amazing to see that connection and to visualize it. You know, when we talk about what I was referring to about this interaction between the gene level, the ecosystem, and the species, and when you see how we are all interconnected, all interdependent, I think this is brilliant to have, based on scientific data and the tree communicating with each other, this concept that are really obvious and visible, like, you know, it's hidden. This is exactly one thing that I was referring to make visible the invisible, to reveal in a positive way how we are interdependent, but in a positive way, not in a frightening way, like that it can translate into values of cooperation and supporting each other and finding solutions to implement some of the recommendation of the scientists to work better together, all these values of solidarity and cooperation that we observe in nature. How can we apply that in our societies? How can we implement some of the scientific recommendation to stop deforestation, for example, in the previous artwork of Thijs, and in this one, how this concept of interdependency can show that it's beautiful because you can support each other. So I think that now we are in a stage of that the scientists, they have realized that they cannot do it by themselves. Everybody needs to be involved. And this is why I think this conversation and this engagement with other parts of societies is crucial. Like, we need artists, we need the private sector, we need everyone to make its part. And I think it's a mixture of humility and also being ready to have time to recognize that our knowledge, as I said with the example of the local communities, is part of the solution, but you have to have the humility and the respect to engage with others that can be part of the solution and can have a different perspective on this complex problem that we are facing together, and that everybody has its own language, its own knowledge, but it's like a puzzle that can help us to find the overall solution and picture. So I think that more and more scientists are having this conversation with both citizens and with artists. In IBES, for example, there was an amazing live dance show at UNESCO with children that really moved all the audience in a very different way than just the fact again and the scientific data, which is important. But you really have to now, in this time of acceleration, we need every kind of support and language to make sure that we as one humanity can collectively address those complex, interconnected challenges.
Yeah, I agree. I think people are numbed by the numbers, and the combination between facts and the emotions that art can provide is the combination that gives you an incentive to act, but the emotional response that is a lot of time lacking is powered by art, visual stimuli, and everything that actually taps into your emotional side of the brain. And I think that is one of the most powerful thing that we're talking about with climate scientists, but also with climate artists, in that sense that we kind of need each other right now at this moment. We've always needed each other and we've grown apart, and this is the age, the time that we're coming together. And it's really hard to sometimes reach out to scientists because they probably get different requests from different artists all the time. But if I can give one advice to all the other artists, like start reaching out, keep pushing, start giving them concrete examples of what you want, and they will respond, because now is the time that they also feel that urgency and that I say that, yeah, that accessibility that's now way easier. So just for the artists themselves, like just ask for 5 minutes Zoom time. Like I can give me 5 minutes and then I will explain it. It really works.
Absolutely.
And Thijs, I really like that you on Instagram and on your biography, you call yourself an ecological artist. And I feel like there's not that many artists who say that about themselves. And where did that, what does that mean to you as a statement, and where did that come from? When did you decide that's how you would define yourself?
Well, I think people will define you. And sometimes people write something about you, like, okay, that makes sense. And I was giving a TED talk where we had this discussion, what title should we give you? And I was like, hey, so I'm not an activist artist. I'm not an environmental artist, awareness artist, but I'm using a medium that is all the time using the latest techniques on the market or using new technologies. But I'm not a techno artist in that sense. So I'm fluidity, but what I appreciate about my practice and the scope of my work is that it's collaboration and entanglement between the scientific side and the people I work with, the studio that we're building that's based on circular economy principles, and that's based on a good fair practice code. And basically we're building these little ecosystems every time between nature, between the data coming from nature, between the scientists, the people we work with. And I think that small ecosystem I define as an eco-artist. So it's in favor of the ecosystem, it's in favor of the system that we're in, but it also reflects on the way we approach works. Because I'm sitting here, but at the same time, there's a giant group of people working on all the small elements that need to be done to get these type of artworks done, from people who analyze the materials to people that take the data streams, to simply people like me who do the drawing, the thinking, the engineering a little bit, and sometimes it all comes together. And I think that is the power of an ecosystem that we have to understand on our scale, but also on the bigger scale.
And with Woven Studios, what you're sort of doing is you're creating more opportunities, right, for these conversations, for these to happen.
Yeah, I think so. So Woven is an interesting part because the knowledge that we've built over the years is not only how to work together with scientists and not scare them, but also at the same time, because if you make work that talks about the impact you have on the world, you should consider every impact you make. So we started to deepen that last few years, talking about what kind of materials do we use, how do we push material use, can we collaborate with people who are pushing material use, and even that's I guess interesting for the art world is that we do not sell work, and we take in account that it will be broken down. So there's material passport attached, and people can read what's being used into it. So not my generation maybe, but next generation, and they will know exactly what's being used in the work, so they can take it apart. Because it's a part of the hope I have that one day we shouldn't be needing to talk about deforestation anymore. So that will make my work lost its function. That means we can take it down and it has served its purpose. And I think that is one of the highest goals I can imagine. If a generation, next generation of my daughter might say like, okay, it was there at this moment, it was crucial, but now it's just a monument for a time that has been passed, and we can take it down, it's fine.
Yeah, it's great. We need artists, of course, making work about environmental issues, but we need all artists at the same time to be making work that is sustainable as well in terms of the material use. I think that's really important. Meriem?
Yeah, I think that's key. I mean, you can see that in the museums that we collaborate with, from Foundation Cartier that does an impact level to any other show that we are included in, because they're all talking about this topic. And there's this hyper awareness, but I wish we could share that knowledge that we're doing, because it's almost an event planning and stage building, which is a museum these days. And the stage and event planning business is one of the most pollutive in the world. So we can share these data, and I think we can open source that really well.
I wonder if there's any questions from the audience. I'm just going to make a shout out in case anybody wants to ask the question. Feel free to put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Meriem, I don't know if you have anything you want to respond. What in terms of perhaps your vision as well going forward, how things could improve?
I think, yeah, I agree with Thijs. I think it's beautiful to think that at one point, if we succeed, that we won't talk about deforestation anymore, because we will completely make this big shift to have an economy and to live in societies that are going to be respectful of the living in a way that we don't have any negative impact on Earth and on the other living species, that whatever we do as humans, we are able to transmit all the potential of life and all the evolution of life. That is something that, it's sacred and it's transmitted, and we can have an economy that is not destructive, that is not, taking out the resources and being extractive, but an economy that is based on all this recycling and in harmony with nature that we can observe again in some part of the world, but that the whole Earth system is operating with some values and principles where the respect of life is the highest value, and that you have the less limited impact on Earth, that you transmit all the potential, all the evolution, that you invest in the relationship, in the links, in these interactions, and that this is the real wealth, that life, biodiversity is the real wealth, not the money, not having more profit at the expense of destructing what nature is. So that's a big shift. And yes, if we can live in a world where my job is also irrelevant, I would be very happy too, because our purpose would have been met.
Yeah. And I guess we all have to feel that urgency as soon as possible based on the data that's coming at us. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we will have, is to convince people that there's an urgency, because the timescale of the biodiversity loss, the climate crisis that's heading us is so rapidly accelerating that action needs to be taken now. But in the same day, we're being distracted because the effects that are coming are so slow.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we are in a urgency. It's true. I think 2030, to meet the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, is only in 8 years. And the target that we have for the climate change, the Paris Agreement, and to stop the loss of biodiversity, it's really within the next 8-10 years that we need to make the big changes. And then the consequences, we will still feel the consequences of all our previous action, but it's a very good time to really reflect on what is essential, what is a priority, and also to learn and to get inspiration from other societies, other cultures, like in the biosphere reserves, or artists that are translating this data into stories that we do get inspiration by stories and role models. And that's why I think it's very important that we realize that the urgency is to change the narrative of us humans living on Earth. And again, change this narrative collectively very urgently, from being the only species that is able to destroy each other and to destroy the other species, from a species that is going to be, again, the guardians, the protectors of the living. I think this narrative has to be changed very quickly. And then people can feel inspired to be part of something that is positive, inspiring, and they can feel that they are part of the solution, and what they do is important and meaningful for everyone. I think this is the challenge, and this is the work that UNESCO is trying to do, change this narrative based on scientific evidence, but also based on the mobilization and the cooperation of every single sector of society, not excluding the private sector, not excluding anyone, because everyone has to feel part of the solution.
And I think on a personal level, I think that's where I think everybody overlaps. Because once we understand, I mean, we're heading for a 3% increase, 3%, sorry, a 3 degrees
increase.
Yeah, the 3 degrees, 2.7 degrees in the next few years. And every 10th of a degree brings the acceleration in weather extremes, sea level rises, harvest failures, and the mass migrations that will cause millions of people and animals, well, to starvation and to harm. So I think if we understand on a personal level that if we can make a change and reduce only 1.1% of a degree by our actions, then I think, well, for me as an artist, that makes a career well spent. But for us as a human being, it makes a life well spent.
I think that brings us nicely to a conclusion. Meriem, you have you say in a podcast that I listened to recently that I really liked, you said, c'est quand c'est le moment le plus sombre que l'aube apparaît. It's when it's during the darkest moment that the dawn arrives. So I think that's a nice image for us to end on. And if you would like to share with our audience, both of you, one action that they can take away from this conversation that you would say, that they can do in their daily lives, and if there's any also a particular reading that or something you've watched recently that you'd like to recommend. Perhaps it's the IPCC latest report. Then could you please both of you share that with our audience before we end?
Sure. Thijs, you want to start?
I'm thinking. You can start.
Okay. I was hoping to get inspiration from you. One action that I would recommend is to connect to each other. I think the COVID-19 has pandemic is also linked to biodiversity loss, by the way. And we didn't have the time to speak about this, but this is also linked to the way we destroy the natural habitats. But one lesson that I got from this COVID-19 is again that we are interdependent and connected. And I would say that in these challenges we have for climate change, biodiversity, and also inequalities, that you can reach out and you can connect with other groups and people that are acting. I think it's very important that we don't only say to, change your consumption, change your behavior, but also that you feel that you are part of a community or a group or association. There are many, more and more, that are willing to make a change. And we see that in the Biosphere Reserve. It's really a platform for cooperation. So you can see that your change of behavior, consumption, production is linked to a wider community. And so you upscale. And then you can really feel that what you do individually is connected to a community that is connecting to a region, connected to a nation, connecting to a region, global region, and international. So I would say, don't feel isolated, reach out, find out who is doing what in your neighborhood, in association, engage yourself in concrete activities, whatever it is, but that's making us human connected and feeling that we collectively can do something. I think it's very important in this time of COVID. And this is one movie that it's been out a few years ago, but I would recommend it's Demain, Tomorrow, from Cyril Dion. This is inspiring people all around the planet. It's very similar to what we do in the Biosphere Reserves, that they are exactly getting together in communities and making a change. We don't speak about it in the media often, but they are there everywhere. And this is what is giving me hope in my work, is that I'm connected to all this community everywhere on the planet that are really making a difference and a change. It's possible. If we can do it together. We have few years to do it, but I really trust that humans are able from the best. And this is what I want to invest in. It's the best in human being, and we can do that.
I definitely agree. Like the idea that we need to get together. We need to be in a community where other people have to share the same values. We need to, so we don't feel so isolated in this huge challenge. So I think that's a really, really good point. And the Fondation Thalie also sponsored Cyril Dion's latest film, Animal, that just came out, which is actually particularly about biodiversity. So we definitely recommend people to watch that, which just came out a few months ago. Thijs?
It's a great, I think togetherness is one of the key workarounds as well, the key points into how we should evolve. And you can see this starting with Extinction Rebellion and all the other growth of activist groups around the world, from passive to a little bit more actionable. There's one book that I just read, which is, I guess, interesting. It's called How to Blow Up a Pipeline by, I think, Andreas Malm, and he opts for more act into the activism corner, which is really interesting how he puts it in perspective, that all big movements have started with a passive and a more actionable group. So for me, that would be a good book to start reading, to see how change was happening. Because I think if there's one thing we've learned from this time of COVID, is that how quick society can change, how quick we can adapt as a species, and how quick we can react as a species to certain threats. And if we consider this climate crisis, this biodiversity loss as the threat it is, then we have learned from the last 2 years that we are able as a species to respond to that, to change our behavior rapidly, and that it will end up in a better result, and we can get out of this. But I think that the urgency part is missing. So I would suggest every movie, book, show, artwork, podcast on this topic, and make it something you can talk about with your friends. Because it's scary to talk about climate crisis. It's overwhelming. And I think a book, a film, a show, an art show, a podcast can make it easy, accessible. Like, hey, listen to this. Hey, what do you think about it? And don't make it scary, because that's the only way we can come together.
Thank you very much. Well, I have to say, it was an immense privilege for me to have you both here today. Thank you very much for being here, for sharing your thoughts. Thank you to our audience, obviously, for watching and contributing. Our next talk is going to be at the end of March with the artist Rosella Biscotti and the environmental lawyer Valerie Cabanes for a talk about environmental and social justice. She's a particular expert in ecocide, so that's going to be a really interesting topic. This conversation is also on Facebook Live. It will be on YouTube in the next few days. We're creating a really interesting podcast format, which hope to release in the next few weeks. So feel free to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, our newsletter to keep up to date with all the latest talks. Thijs, I know you're a good poster on Instagram. How do we keep up to date with your work? Meriem, how do we keep up to date with your latest research?
Well, we also have Instagram and Facebook with the map, etc. So I would be happy to share that and to make sure that people can follow us. And thank you very much. It was really nice to talk to you and always to talk to Thijs. And we continue, Thijs. We have more work to do. Yeah.
We're actually doing a work about biodiversity loss slowly. After the first time we discussed it a half year ago, it's been brewing in the back of my head for a while, and I will reach out. It's almost there.
Yeah, and maybe something positive, like we said, biodiversity recovery, biodiversity.
Exactly, regeneration.
Exactly, absolutely, reconnecting. That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for watching, and have a fantastic evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.